10, 9, 8, 7, 6, stand by, 4, 3, counting to go on air, 2, 1, and a warm welcome to the GDB 2021 Re-Energise Conference. And I hope if nothing else, this has re-energized you so far this morning. I'm going to start with a question. What is wrong with this opening greeting? It's so great to see you and it's so great to be here. Yeah, I can't see you and I'm not there. I'm here in Brighton and you're wherever you are, in your kid's bedroom, in the study, who knows? But the point is, this is going to be a very different event. But we've put a lot of thought into this and we believe that this can be even better, certainly as good as, and maybe even better than other conferences in the past, because maybe, just maybe, 2021 has re-energized us into doing things differently, and that can be for the better. So we hope that the next 2.5 hours will be, I don't know, as good as 2.5 hours of Netflix. That's our challenge. My name is John Young. Some of you, many of you will know me, but for those that don't, I am a very proud member of the GDB community. I run a business consultancy, myself, media training. Another string to my bow is until very recently, I worked at the BBC as a newsreader and reporter, and that was a real privilege. But that leads me to another question. How did you re-energize yourself last year? You may have been at the conference this time last year in that lovely hotel. And we were thinking, how are we going to re-energize? How are we going to keep going? Little did we know what was coming up. Well, the way I re-energize, perhaps another word we could use is reinvent. I reinvented myself by offering workshops that help businesses make their online meetings, sales meetings, staff meetings, client meetings, be as professional as a TV bulletin. And that's kept me very busy. How did you re-energize yourself? How did you use what we took away from our event last year? I'm wondering. And we've got some inspiring people lined up this week, today, in the next couple of hours, to share some thoughts about that. If you have a lot of staff that you're worrying about, our first speaker has 7,500 staff to worry about. She's going to share some great tips. Our second speaker is going to think again about the future of work. What next? How do you reinvent? And I've taken a look at his website, his video, and boom, I tell you what, if the line goes down, we'll just play that on a permanent loop because it's one of the most inspiring reinventions of a promotional video. We're going to have a break, 10-minute break at 10 to 10. Then we've got a bit of music for you, a bit of comedy lined up, thinking about how to keep mental health and how music and relaxing can be so important at this time. Then we're going to hear all about imposter syndrome. Do you suffer from it? I have, perhaps we all have. We're going to have a little think about that before we go into another break and a Q&A. Now, the Q&A is going to be a bit different this year, of course. I can't look at you and see people putting their hands up and make a best guess at who asked the most interesting question. We have our Slido function, which is on your web portal, so you should be able to see the Slido function, tap in some questions. The tie is very on brand. I've already had a message coming in, so that's working. We're not using the chat function. We are having the Slido. So put a question there. And the really clever thing is, the more questions that come in, you can vote on them. And then we make sure the questions that are asked are the ones that we're most interested in hearing from. So it'll be my job to keep an eye on that. Very briefly, because we want to crack on, housekeeping. If the fire alarm goes off, it's yours. So go and do something about it and don't stay. You know where your own loos are, you know where your own coffee is, so I don't need to worry about that. The web portal that so much effort has gone into that you're on now will be up for the next couple of days. So if you want to find out a bit more about who everyone is and what we were talking about, that will still be there for a couple of days. And there'll be a recording of this available as well, so you don't have to make notes. This event is being recorded for that recording, obviously, but you're not, so there are no confidentiality issues there. Right, that's the boring housekeeping out the way. I hope you're fired up. I hope you're raring to go. I think we all are. None of this could have happened without GDB, the fantastic team there, of course, Sally, Mandy, Gabriella, Katie, and the CEO, the Chief Executive, Jeff Alexander. Jeff, over to you.
Well, thank you, John. Thank you for that. It's already inspiring. I already feel inspired. That clapperboard, is that what you call it, a clapperboard?
We do. We never use it in news, but I use it in my workshops and activities because it's just a bit of fun, but totally misleading. Never, ever seen that used in news.
Right. Sally, that's going to be a regular feature of GDB events from now on. I just want to say, you know, welcome on behalf of GDB to the GDB Re-Energise Conference 2021. It is rather different, as John alluded to our event last year at the Stanhill Court, but nevertheless, as all good businesses have done, we've adapted and we've shown our flexibility. All I really want to do, other than to welcome you, and it is great that there are so many of you on at this conference, it really is superb, is to thank our headline sponsors, well, all our sponsors, because as ever, without them, we cannot lay on this type of event. So first, I'd like to thank the Thacum Group as our headline sponsor, and we're going to be hearing from Brett in a few minutes. He's promised to keep his talk below 90 minutes, so I'm going to hold him. I'm going to hold him to that. I'd also like to thank our event sponsors, Reigate and Banstead Borough Council, and particularly Councillor Eddie Humphreys and Simon Bland for their continuing support for GDB and the Gatwick Diamond. Also, our other sponsors, Southern Rail and Gatwick Express. I don't need to say too much because Angie's been introduced and she is one of our main speakers today. And finally, but certainly not least, to Avensis, who again have made this all possible through their support, sponsorship, and technical expertise. So John, I've now got the easy job for the rest of the morning. Back to you.
Thanks very much indeed, Jeff. That's what we call a pickup. Jeff has thrown to me and I've picked up. So you're getting some free media training tips coming at you here. I'm now going to throw to Brett North, who is, as Jeff mentioned, from the headline sponsor. So chance to hear a few words from Brett, group marketing director, excuse me, of our headline sponsor, Thacum Group.
John, thank you. So this is where I'm picking up. Great, lovely. Sound like rugby. Good stuff. Thank you. Almost got promoted as well. Great. Thank you very much for that. The guy who speaks is Rob Boughton. I'll give you his email address. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome. And many of you already know Thacum Group perhaps from other bits and pieces. Those of you who don't, we're a local company, very proud to be part of the Gatwick Diamond business. In fact, we've been born, grown, brought up. And in fact, many of us are bringing up our families and all that kind of stuff in the region. So we really are sort of a local business, local boy done good, local girl done good, that kind of business. Really proud to be part of Re-Energise. If there's ever a time, perhaps when business needs that re-energize 3 weeks into 2021, it's probably this, as we, so much changed since we last met in the last year. Businesses looking after their customers, their staff, the changes, we've changed the way we deal with companies. I think in all of those things that are going on, whether it's Brexit or COVID, one of the things that I think has come really out for all businesses and groups is that moment for all of us to take a moment, take a breath, get in there, re-energize, think about what we're doing. I think that's what today's all about. That's why we really wanted to support it. Think this is a great thing for the local business community to get a moment out there and do that work. Because at the moment, we're trying to balance homeschooling, so suddenly we become PE masters and mistresses and maths teachers, and we're trying to run business and calls with kids wandering through and all the rest of it. So today, for the next 2.5 hours, hopefully you can join with us, have a great moment, feel energized, some great speakers, pick up some interesting information. I understand it's a great program. So we're very proud to be a headline sponsor of this. We really hope that you enjoy the moment and share that along. And now I think I'm going to do what John will call a throwback. John, thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. I've caught the ball, it's landed, and I'm now going to throw it in another direction on my screen. Our next speaker is over here, so we could almost do that. Honestly, I'm rambling there. Let's move on. Brett, thank you very much indeed, and great, as I say, without you and your company and the other sponsors, this wouldn't be happening, so we're grateful. So let's go to our first of our 4 great speakers. I know I've come across this speaker before, because as a BBC reporter, we would often be doing stories about the railways, and many companies, when there are problems, will put up a statement. They'll say, here's what we think, can you just read this out? Southern Rail and Gatwick Express often did not. And they'd say, yeah, you can interview one of us. And we'd interview the lady we're about to hear from. Spent her 20 years on the railways, passionate about customer service, but now with fewer customers, dealing with the stresses and problems of staff. 7,451, I think, is the number I've got here, Angie, that you gave me, a lot of staff. So if you're thinking, my staff are struggling at the moment, how can I help? Here's the speaker to help you. Please welcome to the stage, throwing to you now, Angie Dole, CEO of Southern Rail and Gatwick Express.
Good morning. You've promoted me as well, so I'll be delighted with that. Good morning, everybody, and really delighted to be speaking here today about what we've been doing and really about the power of believing we can. I think, you know, all of us this time last year would never have been able to predict the impact this global pandemic would have had on us both personally and professionally. And this crisis has probably been the greatest challenge that we will ever face in our lifetimes. And in crisis, our teams will turn to us. They'll be looking for us to show strong leadership, to provide answers, and to provide reassurance. And for us as leaders, this can be extremely stressful, you know, taking the weight of everything on our shoulders. And no doubt you have developed your own coping strategies on how you've dealt with this over the last 10 months. And if I were to ask you all individually how you've coped, I'm pretty sure there'd be some sort of common themes about you've held on to your hope and you've held on to believe. And it's sometimes you've said to yourself and to your teams, we can get through this. We can adapt to new ways of working. We can be agile and we can be innovative and take new opportunities, grasp them. So like so many of you here today, your business will have suffered in all sorts of ways, be you small, large, well-established or startup. The whole experience would have really tested you. Now, Southern Rail is probably the oldest business in the region. We've been around for 150 years, and our stations have always been at the heart of the communities across the Southeast. And we've really driven not only the local economy, but we've also driven the regional and the national economy, as well as getting millions of passengers safely from A to B every day. So we're used to knowing what we're doing. We're used to knowing the path we're on. However, we have seen a significant reduction in passenger numbers, down 85% at the moment, and revenue down 93% compared to COVID. And we've come to the realization that that pandemic will radically change the way we operate going forward for our colleagues, for our customers, for our stakeholders, and our communities. As John said, I'm the manager, well, he said I was the CEO, but I'm actually the managing director for Southern and Gatwick Express. But back in February, I also took on the role as the lead for Govia Thameslink Railway COVID-19 response team. And when I took that on, I thought it would be for a couple of weeks. I never thought 10 months later we'd still be in this crisis. And like lots of employers, my first concern was, well, how do we find ways of keeping that 7,500 workforce motivated at a time when many of them were feeling really stressed about job security, anxious about their families or friends catching the virus, and also many who lived alone feeling really isolated. So I was determined that we created that sense of hope for our colleagues, and that together we would know that we could get through this, and we would get through this because we're there for our key workers, we needed to be there for our communities, but more importantly, we needed to be there for each other and each other's well-being. So we created 4 key strategies with the emphasis on we can. We can ensure the health and safety of our colleagues. We can care for the vulnerable at this most challenging time. We can operate a safe and reliable service for our key workers, and we can ensure that we have a sustainable business at the end of this. In order to deliver this, we really needed to bring out the best in our people, something that we've always prioritised at Southern and GTR. Without our people, we cannot run our trains and stations. You know, we don't own anything, we lease everything. Engaged staff are our most precious asset that we have. For me, engagement means people feeling trusted, they feel valued, cared for, that they are appreciated, and more importantly, they have a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose, and they feel they are empowered. Achieving this in normal circumstances is really challenging, let alone in a global crisis. In a crisis as leaders, we have to make decisions, critical decisions, really quickly in response to rapidly changing circumstances. And often at times, we don't have the time to consult with our staff, our customers and our stakeholders like we do in normal times. And by doing that, making those quick decisions and not consulting so much, we do run the risk of engaging those people. Many customers and staff will judge a company on how they've been treated during this crisis. And when this is all over, and it will be over, they will either be more loyal customers and employees, or they will find another business. So at GTR, we were acutely aware that we needed to find a fine balance here. You know, leading the crisis team, the government were changing policies and protocols almost every day. We were having to update our policies, how we dealt with our staff. So I recognised that one of the things we had to do to keep our staff engaged was really be able to get information out to them really, really quickly. But equally important, give them the opportunity to respond. Let them interact with us, let them share their thoughts, their ideas, and more importantly, their concerns. We couldn't help them if we didn't know what was worrying them. So for this, I turned to our communications team. We're a big organisation, so we do have a big structure that sits behind us. But we also have the added complexity that only do we not have 7,500 people that we need to communicate with. They're spread over a huge geographical area. You know, our area stretches from King's Lynn all the way down to Southampton and Eastbourne. People who work in shifts, and all our support functions were now working from home. So I said to our head of comms, you know, what can we do differently? And he said, we can do things differently, and we can up our communication so that everybody knows what's happening, but more importantly, why we are making the changes. I cannot stress enough the power of why in this situation or in any situation. So we used a variety of different tools, such as setting up our weekly managers and trade union COVID-19 briefing. Now, this was quite a unique thing for us to do because we are a very unionised organisation, but to bring managers and unions into the same meeting and sharing it, we decided it was better to be transparent with everybody across the way because we needed our health and safety reps to be working with us. So we did that via Teams to 1,000 people. It's a weekly briefing, and I'm now on briefing number 45. I thought I might do about 12. We developed new apps so people get information really quickly. We've created a new section on our intranet site so people know where to go and get the most up-to-date policies. But more importantly, we've always made sure that our staff have had the opportunity to have their voice heard. The language that we've used has been really important as well as part of our communication strategy. And because we wanted our people to know that we really care about them and we really care about their well-being and understand the challenges they face. You know, as we've already said today, Peaceful's personal life and work life have really blurred over the last couple of months. So it was really important that people understood, we knew that they had pressures about her home learning. And more importantly, out of everything, as I said earlier, we needed to make sure that people were provided with some hope. Now, quite fortuitously, last January, we'd already launched a new communications, internal, external communication plan with the strapline "We're with you." And, you know, back then, I don't think we would have realised just how fitting this message would have been with this sense of we can do this. So early on in the pandemic, we were luckily enough that we were designated as key workers as we had to keep our operation running, and the government stepped in and provided financial support for us to run the railway in the first lockdown primarily for NHS workers. And our staff really enthusiastically joined in with that, and particularly the Thursday night clap for carers. And each week I was amazed that they came up with more innovative ways to say thank you to the NHS staff. You know, they asked us, could we put a thank you message on the side of the train? And we said, yes, we can. Our drivers made special announcements. They flashed their lights, they sounded their horns. We had staff clapping and cheering at stations. We had our control team arranging for our thank you NHS train to visit over 150 stations on our network, which are close to hospitals. So as the NHS workers were either heading home or heading out to work, they could see us thanking us. And our conductors even created a music video that went on YouTube and had around about 4,000 hits. So it was fantastic to see everybody coming together with that real can-do attitude that really boosted everybody's morale and also enabled us to celebrate our own railway heroes and keep our trains running. So this started something really special. And through seeing our teams come together for the Clap for Carers, we wanted to take this one step forward. And we encouraged them to do their to come up with their own we can ideas to support our communities, and in particular focus on caring for the most vulnerable. And they really showed us that they could with some great initiatives. They took bikes that had been abandoned at station for months and refurbished them through local charities and donated them to NHS. They really got behind the government employability schemes, such as the sector-based work academies that upskill and offer jobs to people who've been recently or long-term employment, something particularly important around our area, particularly around the Gatwick area. They gave us local intelligence at stations to make sure that we put extra stops in on trains for businesses and key workers. They created food bank drop-offs, they raised money. And one of the most innovative things we did, and really showed how we worked with other partners, was we set up mental health hubs at Brighton and Eastbourne Station with support from NHS Sussex to allow people in the community to get care that they needed at a time when people found it difficult to get to their GP. This also provided us with a great opportunity to recognise our staff and their efforts, whether we celebrated that with internal stories, with the new news channels that we have, by our stakeholders, or even arranging a local press coverage. Something I know from feedback from our staff they really appreciated. Our can-do approach, and we can approach, really helped us to refocus. It made us become more agile, work collaboratively with the wider industry, and innovate with new partners. You know, the railway has been around for a long time. It's a complicated industry, and to change something normally takes forever. We normally change the timetable twice a year. That takes 6 months of planning. In the first couple, we have changed our timetable 8 times now in 10 months. That's absolutely unheard of. But we also had other challenges. You know, at the beginning of the pandemic, we couldn't get hold of hand sanitizer. The world and his wife was looking for it. So I set the commercial director the challenge of finding finding us a consistent supply. And he said, we can think differently about this. We can get a completely new supply source. And I thought, well, what's so different about that? Until he said, no, we can find a company. I can find a local gin company, and I'm going to get them to change their production from making gin to making hand sanitizer. And that was what we did. And I've got so many examples of how, when we said to our staff and our teams, look, we can do this, and we empower you to do what we need to do. We've got viricide products that now kill the virus for up to 28 days. We put in new digital ticketing. We move refunds online. It's just been amazing. So I've only touched on a few things that we've really achieved by believing we can to motivate and employ our people and really give them hope about their future. And we've listened to their ideas, and we've acted on their concerns. Without our people, we would not have been able to provide the railway service that has delivered for our key workers at the time when we've most needed it. And I'm really, really proud, and I've been amazed by their resilience, their hard work, their dedication, and particularly their commitment and their can-do attitude over the last 10 months. I know from speaking to other organisations of business along the network, we've all got to be a lot proud of. With the rollout of the vaccine firmly underway, with 4.5 million people now vaccinated, we should all believe that together we can support the economic recovery of this region, and we can build back better. Thank you. And back to you, John.
Thank you very much indeed, Angie. And I do apologise about the promotion there. I was carefully researching it all this morning.
No, I love the promotion.
And how lovely, from a personal perspective, for me to be able to sit and relax and listen to you for 13, 14, 15 minutes. You know, anyone who's ever dealt with news people knows they'll come along with a camera, they'll switch it on, your 5-6 minute interview turns into a 14-second clip, and it's all a little bit frustrating for everyone. So great to really hear what you've done there, Angie. And my big takeaway there was that phrase you used, the power of why. The power of why. I think if you explain why you're doing things, people are far more likely to get on board. It's the same in the news industry and consultancy. If you explain what the benefit is, the why, things come together. But I love the gin story as well.
Yeah.
There's been quite a lot of that. There was a company in Brighton down here where they were doing that. Maybe that was the company you were involved with. Maybe you've got some.
But it was a local company.
Good. Well, let's keep it local. Angie, thank you very much indeed for that. For our next speaker now, we could be heading to bed. Let me explain. Had a chat with Scott earlier, and he said that one of the greatest things that had happened, a good thing that had happened to him in 2020, was his dog had had the snip, which we'll maybe hear more about in a moment, but also sometimes the dog joins him working from bed. But I think we can safely say he's not working from bed now. Scott McArthur is going to talk to us about reinventing and being nimble, and the things that Angie was mentioning there for a big, huge company. How do you do that for yourself? As I mentioned earlier, Scott has a really, in my judgment, impressive video on his website. As a speaker, he and I and others in this industry have had to reinvent ourselves for a virtual world. And the showreel that Scott has put together of the imagination of the things you can do in a virtual world really inspired me. And that's why we're very lucky, I think, to have Scott here today. You can see a great background there on air, GDB Re-Energise, all set to go. Scott, tell us how to reinvent ourselves. Over to you, Scott McArthur.
I'd spent most of the night drinking half a bottle of whiskey. It wasn't your gin, unfortunately, Angie. And I was lying in my bed, looking forward to the day off the following day because it was Christmas. And at the time, I happened to work in the fish industry. And my main focus, I was HR director for one of the big food companies, a company they're now called Northern Foods. And it was, I think it was 4 o'clock in the morning. I was lying in a hotel room because I actually lived in Cheshire at the time, but I was living and working in Peterhead, or for any Scots in the room, Peterhead. And the phone rang. And it was my boss. Now, this was a bit weird because one, I was drunk, and two, I was on holiday. And we just really finished a really, frantic time, because Christmas, for those of you in manufacturing, will know that Christmas is the time you make your money. And some of us have just experienced the opposite of that, haven't we, during the COVID pandemic during Christmas. But we'd been working really hard dealing with what we called gold. And gold is the technical term we used in the fish industry for this stuff, salmon. We made more salmon than any other company in the world. We processed more salmon than any other company in the world. It was a massive, massive part of our business, and it made us a fortune. But the phone rang, as I said, and it was Jim. And Jim was my managing director. And he said, hello. And I was like, oh, you can imagine. I'm not going to say what I actually said because it wouldn't be appropriate. But he said, you need to get into the factory now. And I was like, Jim, are you kidding? He went, no, you need to come in now. Now, Jim is a very dear friend to this day. And I've never known him to sound like that. He's one of the most gentle people I've ever worked with in my career. So I thought, okay. So I got up. Obviously, I didn't drive. I called a taxi, got into the factory. It was only about 10 minutes away, but you don't go walking in Peterhead late at night. It's quite a scary place. Anyway, I got to the factory and I walked into the boardroom. And in the boardroom, it was a classic boardroom, big mahogany board table, little desk at the far side. And here was Jim and all the other team in the room. I think I was second last to get there. I did have half a bottle of Speyside Malt inside me. But anyway, so he said, there's been a mistake. And I was like, oh, right, okay. Now, we get in manufacturing, you get mistakes. But he said, there's been a mistake and it's a big one. And I was like, oh, God. So we all sat down and we had like the manufacturing team over here. We had the support staff over here. We had all the sort of technical people around about us. And he said, well, what's happened is in the fish factory, it's a huge fish factory. We had our own port. The boats used to come into our own, we had our own little, I don't know, harbour, I guess you would call it. They would then let the salmon go down onto the things, onto the ground, and we would process the salmon. And in one step of the salmon processing is a really important step. And for a particular client, which was Tesco, it was really important because this was a step where we looked at the quality of the meat. Now, if you've ever had salmon, you'll know that, most salmon is pink. Certainly most wild salmon is pink. That's a whole other story about other types of salmon. But on the back side of the salmon, you'll probably have seen the grey sort of brown meat on the salmon. Tesco's had their finest range, and on the Tesco's finest range salmon, there was no brown meat. And what we used to have was we had a process where the salmon would lie in a conveyor belt, and there'd be this ice laser. It was amazing. Ice laser would skim off the brown meat and it would go really quick. And it turns out that I hadn't been the only person on the whiskey that night. 2 of the quality managers who were managing this machine had been drinking on site, and they'd got the setting wrong. Now, this is calamitous at the best of times, but at Christmas, it's even worse because the whole factory was busy making salmon for Tesco's. Hundreds of these things were going through the process. Dozens of tons of salmon were going all over the country. And it turns out what happened is, as I said, they'd got drunk. They hadn't taken the brown meat off, but because of the process, it came straight out of that machine, into the wrapping machine, into boxes, into trucks, and off to the distribution centres. So here was Tesco's with their biggest day ahead of them in terms of sales, with brown meat on their finest salmon. What on earth are we going to do? So Jim, I said he was a gentleman, he's a quiet man. He was raging, but he was holding it back. And he said, what are we going to do? So there was a debate in the room about, well, we just don't tell them. We'll let the customers find them and there might be the occasional complaint. Others were going, oh my God, we're going to have to recall them. There's not 15 tons of salmon lying around anywhere. You can't just replace it. That means all these hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people would not have their salmon for Christmas Day. So Jim said, but this time it was at 5:30 in the morning. He said, I'm going to phone the sales director. And we were all like, oh, and he did it in front of us. I'm actually shaking. It's amazing. I haven't told this story for a wee while. I'm actually shaking telling you the story. So Jim called the sales director and she, you can imagine she was tired and she wasn't very pleased to get a call at 5:30 in the morning. And the air did go pretty blue, if I'm honest. But Jim stayed really cool. And he said, look, we're really sorry. I promise we're going to investigate this. He didn't tell her that they'd been drunk on duty, but he said, I promise we're going to investigate this. And let's talk. So they had a chat and we could all hear it. It was on speakerphone. And basically we gave them a bit of a reduction and he offered to send our staff in buses from Peterhead. And that's away up at the far north of Scotland. You think Aberdeen's up north. It's proper north. But we would send our people down to the main distribution centre just outside Edinburgh before it got out to the rest of the UK. So we did that. And for she said, okay. And she agreed. What do you think happened the next Christmas? What do you think happened? Well, I'll tell you what happened. Tesco's doubled their order. They came back and they said, of all the suppliers that we've worked with, you're the only supplier in the last 10 years that's been honest, that's told us the truth. And Jim was such a good leader that, it was almost like osmotic. And that's the first thing I want you to think about, because I think, my talk's called Renaissance, that basically means rebirth. I think the lesson from Jim, and it's stuck, honestly, guys, that was 20 years ago, and it's stuck with me forever. And I think Jim was an example 20 years ago of how I would like, and I'm not going to say it's definitely going to happen, but how I would like to see leaders develop in the next few years. Now, what Angie said earlier about we'll be judged on how we behave and how we conduct ourselves during COVID is going to be really important to us. Absolutely. So the takeaway I'd like you to get from that little story that's given me goosebumps is this. The leaders that we've been up to this point, not all of us, but many of us, and I've worked in a couple hundred companies and probably over 70% of leaders are like superheroes, like Steve Jobs. I don't think that's what we need, certainly not in the next 2 years. And indeed, what I think we need is more Jims. And do you know what? Jim's hobby is gardening. And he's retired now and he lives just close. I live in the Cotswolds and Jim's just over the hill here. It's amazing. He's quite local to me. And I think leaders need to be acting more like gardeners after the COVID pandemic. They need to be nurturing their staff. They need to be preparing the ground for the future. They need to be fertilizing. They need to be taking away the weeds and moving away the things that are preventing their people from flourishing. And Angie, I loved what you said about how you're doing that with your people. It's an absolutely beautiful example of what I would like to see. So that's the first thing, a transformation, a renaissance in leadership from the superhero to the gardener. One of my first jobs. What was my first job? That's actually my second. My first job was a kilt maker, but my second job involved these things, microscopes. I was a scientist, and I went from human remains to human resources. That's my best line. Anyway, I was working in research. I did arthritis research and a bit of brain research, hence why I've got brain up here. And I was in my second year there after university, and my professor, whose name was Dougal Gardner, called me in. Now, Dougal was a challenging chap, quite a difficult fella, but we had an okay relationship. I never called him Dougal at this point. His name was absolutely Sir. And Sir Dougal said, Scott, I've got a job for you. I'd like you to go into the lecture theatre, and I'd like you to start teaching third-year medics college and chemistry. Well, I'd never stood on my feet before. I'd never spoken in public before. I'd spoken a little bit at university, as most of us do, but I hadn't really done anything publicly. I knew my college and chemistry, so that wasn't a problem, but I was absolutely terrified. And now, if you've ever seen these old Frankenstein movies where you see the lecture theatre, it's like a shape, like a cone with an operating table there, that's what it was like. And I was standing there with 423-year-olds, because they were all roughly that age in third year. I was 23, so I was standing there with 400 of my peers teaching them college and chemistry. Oof, it was an absolute disaster. I was terrible. 8 weeks of this, the poor souls, I used to have hair, I had long hair, and I used to come out and I was all stuck together, and it was on my lab coat. Oh, it was awful. But at the end of the 8 weeks, Dougal Gardner, his name, Professor Gardner, Sir, called me into his office. Now, I have to be honest, I really thought he was going to sack me. I really, really thought he was going to sack me. And he said, okay, in you come. And I went in and he said, sit down. And I thought, here we go, here we go. He said, how did you think you got on? And I was like, well, I didn't go on very well, Professor. It was a disaster. I don't think anyone learned anything. I never want to speak in public again. And he looked at me. Now, he kind of used to do this with his glasses. He looked at me and he said, right, he said, give yourself a grade. And I was like, oh, shit, E to F. And I went, well, F. I was terrible. It was a failure. I'm embarrassed that I did that. And he looked at me, and I really thought this was the moment where the P45 was going to come out. And he said, can I give you a grade? And I went, aye, okay. Sorry, I went a bit vernacular there. I went, yes, okay, Professor. And he said, right, I'm going to give you this grade. And again, the nose thing went like that. And he went, I'm going to give you a not yet. And I was like, what? What's that? What's that? What do you think he was doing? What do you think he was doing? 15 years later, this is now 5 years later, 5 years ago, sorry, I did my first TEDx talk. And I'd spent the best part of 15 years going around the world with KPMG and others, working at dozens of companies as an HR consultant. And I did my first TEDx, and it was in front of 3,000 people. It's the biggest one in Europe, down here in Warwick. And I invited Dougal, who was in his 90s at this point, and I said, could you come? He's now called Dougal because he was my friend at this point. He couldn't come, he was ill, and he couldn't quite manage it. So we did the TEDx, and that was fine. It all went really well. It was great meeting some brilliant people. And then I sent him the video, and he invited me up to Edinburgh to the Royal College of Surgeons, which is where he was the president at that time. And he said, look, come up, I'll buy you dinner, and we can have a chat about your talk. So I went up to Edinburgh. I was quite nervous because although it had been a long time, he was still my professor, he was still he's up here in my estimation. Anyway, I went and his son David was there, and he said, look, here's the prof. And I went in, and he was sitting at a round table, and I sat down, and we had a hug and a smile, and I sat down. I could feel my emotions go. He just died, so it's quite ugh. But he had his glasses here. Give yourself a grade. And I was like, no, I'm not giving myself a grade, Prof. No way, no way. He said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll give you a grade. And again, he did this with his glasses, and he says, I'll give you an A. And I was like, oh, great. But this was the bit that I want you to really think about. He leant right into me and he went, but what do you think he was doing? And I think that's the second thing I want you to think of, because I think the encouragement I got from him as a mentor is something we need to think about as leaders and as individuals. But more than that, the development program that I went on, that I'm still on, as a professional speaker these days has led me to all sorts of places and to have all sorts of journeys. And I think that the investment in people, although it's quite trite to say it, I don't think companies always took it seriously. And I think if there's going to be a renaissance, we need to think about investing in our people more and really letting them do things that maybe they don't exactly add to the bottom line, but certainly let them develop, because that to me is the secret of success. I was sat in Derby. It was only 2 years ago, and I was very lucky. I was sharing a stage with Warren Buffett. You may have heard of Warren. He's one of the most successful business people in the world. And he did a talk. Now, I have to be honest, he's not a great speaker. But then again, I'm not a multi-billionaire. So, but he did his piece. And at the end, there was a sort of Q&A type thing. I hope somebody asks as good a question as this later. But there was this Q&A, and somebody said, Warren, what's the biggest issue in business today? And he sort of fumbled a little bit like that. And then he said, I'll tell you what it is. He said, it's people, checking people, checking people, checking people. Now that did stick in my head, but I don't think I really understood it until I started to work with auditors, because what do? They're people who check people who check people. But that has then expanded in my thinking. And I think now in the post-COVID, well, hopefully post-COVID soon, it's made me see something that I never thought I'd ever say. Never thought I would say this. I think there's a toxin in our organizations. And I think that toxin is something that might surprise you. I think we've been hoodwinked into it by a lot of IT vendors. Sorry if you're an IT vendor. I think that toxin is key performance indicators. The place has gone mad. We're measuring everything. I had a call from a client the other day saying, I'm working as marketing director, and I won't tell you who for, but it's a very well-known and very large organization. And he said, you know what, Scott? I said, what is it? He said, they're actually monitoring my keystrokes. Every moment of his day is monitored. I think we need to get real with KPIs. I think we need to start reducing them in the post-COVID world, free up people. And I'll give you, this might surprise you as well, but I'm going to give you a KPI to help you with that. And I think if we start to reframe the way we work, if we want a renaissance post-COVID, here's an idea. Think about everything in this context. We only live for 28,000 days on average, and the last few months have put that into sharp focus with so many people dying. 28,000 days. I think our organization should be built around this KPI. Time well spent. It's such a powerful way to frame your organization. Now, I hope you've enjoyed my stories. And I think stories are part of the solution, actually. And one of my other favorite, you'll see the little astronaut there, that's from the film Interstellar. And there's a moment in Interstellar when one of the characters says this: empathy only extends as far as our line of sight. Empathy only extends as far as our line of sight. And if there's one thing that I've been disappointed with the news in the last few months, is there's not been enough stories, because you see, stories let you see how others are experiencing the world. They act as an empathy engine. I hope that the last 15, 20 minutes has acted as an empathy engine for you to start thinking about the three things. Be a gardener. Be a gardener. Think about how that could be your leadership style. Reduce the KPIs in your organization and think about time well spent. And don't forget, probably the most important thing there is at the moment is probably personal development is probably the new pension. Think about that. Personal development is probably the new pension. I hope you found that interesting. But more than anything else, when you go back to the office, maybe you're in the office or maybe you're in your bedroom like me, I've got my bed set right here. I hope that was time well spent. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Scott. I think that certainly was time well spent for me. Apologies to any IT vendors out there. I'm sure no offense was meant. Listen, my takeaway there, the leaders to be gardeners. I'm sensing a theme developing here for what Angie spoke about, leadership and teams, gardening as a theme. And that phrase there, empathy engine, that really kicked in for me. So Scott, thank you. I'm going to be using that. relentlessly in future. Storytelling, part of what I offer and share. And in journalism, everything's a story, isn't it? That's what we're always trying to do. And in news, trying to come up with positive stories about COVID as well. But the more positive stories from your workforce, from what's going on at Southern and Gatwick Express and in your business, it's got to be a good thing. And when you tell them, you create the empathy. And when you create the empathy, I think you get the results. We are back on air, bang on time, with huge thanks there to Glen for that music. Glen, I've got a quick request, actually. I've got quite a lot of work on this afternoon, and I just want something going on in the background, and my Bluetooth thing's playing up. So can you just stay on for the next few hours and keep me comfortable?
Yeah, funnily enough, my diary's quite empty for the next rest of my life, actually. So, John, it would be a great pleasure.
Well, I hope it isn't, because when we had a chat on the phone the other day, Glen, we were talking, I was asking all the speakers, actually, what had re-energized them in 2020. We all think, oh, we'll look back on that as a year to forget. And of course, many of us will for many reasons, but there must have been some good things too. And Glen, you told me, well, it wasn't 2019. And you made the broad point, and I think this is this theme today, isn't it? That actually you were forced to change things. You were forced to re-energize, reinvent, do things differently this year. During last year ahead of this. And that's what we're going to think about now as we basically go back now to Glen to talk us through more about that and the importance of music and mental health and giving yourselves breaks and kicking back a bit, I think. So Glen, having just heard your lovely music there, let's bring you back to talk us through that. And don't forget, of course, questions coming in as well. If you've got any questions for Glen, we've already got some there for Angie and as well. So Glen, over to you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much, John. Nice to pick that up from you. Now, so I'm going to talk to you about how sound impacts every aspect of our lives, you know, all kinds of levels. And I guarantee you that by the end of this talk, you'll be saying to yourselves, why in God's name did he tell us all of that stuff, and scratching your heads? But hopefully there'll be some good things. Firstly, I should take you through my setup. Now, I definitely have got a piano here. I'll just play some chords for you. That's proof. You can't actually see it, but it is down there. Behind me, you've got the lower half of the Bee Gees, and they're going to be sending out sexual energy to all of you, that's Barry Gibb's crotch area there. As you can see, that's primed and ready to go for you. In the interest of full disclosure, I should just say that my the computer that I'm talking to you from at the moment is actually balanced on an ironing board and a box of Christmas decorations and a copy of the board game Catopoly, which is a cat version of Monopoly. And there'll be more cats later on in this talk. But first of all, to get things going, I want to do a little experiment with you, if I might. Okay, so bear with me on this one for a moment. I'm going to play for you a few chords, and I want you to make a sort of mental note of how these chords make you feel, what emotions you feel. So listen to these. Hope you can hear these. What are you getting off this? Are you getting it's sort of a bit melancholy? Perhaps you're feeling sadder than you were when Scott was talking, taking the mood down slightly a little bit now. I'm going to add an extra element in and see what you think now. Sometimes I feel my heart will overflow. Hello, is it me you're looking for? Well, now you'll probably find that your emotions have changed quite a lot. You'll probably have gone from feeling melancholy to being quite angry that a middle-aged man is sat in front of you doing an impersonation of Lionel Richie and wasting your time completely. Anyway, that's the end of that experiment, and I hope we all learned something from that. But I want to go on to talk about sound in a wider context. Actually, I'll give you a little example about how music has helped me right from an early age, in fact. When I was a little boy, I had quite a bad speech impediment, and it was a difficult thing because it stopped me learning at school. I was really struggling. The teachers couldn't understand me at all, and my friends used to laugh at me. And I'll give you an example. I'd say some words like, for example, the word fame would come out as fame, and a word like price would come out as price, like that. And it really stood in my way for a long time, until one day I realized that I could make it work for me, and I could actually even monetize it. And it was then that I decided to become an Elton John impersonator. Fame was the price you paid, and even when you died, well, the press still hounded you. All the papers had to say was that Marilyn was found in the nude, etc., etc. Anyway, look, I'm going to stop being ridiculous now, and I'm going to actually talk about what I was asked to come here to talk about. And now, Scott, I'm going to bring Scott in because I've found out a few things that are more sort of even more scientific than doing a terrible impersonation of Elton John, about how sound can impact us. Now, I want to talk about well-being, but also want to talk about how sound can impact us at a cellular level. And I'm talking about a field of medicine called physioacoustics. Now, I'll give you an example of how this works. And Scott, you'll forgive me if this is wrong, because I'm not an expert in this by any stretch of the imagination. But I gather that brain waves are measured in hertz and sound is measured in the same way. And I understand that a healthy brain will fire at kind of roughly like 40 hertz. And a brain that's encountering some problems from Alzheimer's may have other areas that are firing at a different speed. This is incredibly hard to do, actually. This is where my castanets training comes in. And it's quite one thing that you can do that has been shown to impact this. And again, and I'm sorry if this is wrong, but I've been looking into this, is that there are such things as acoustic therapy chairs, and they emit 40 hertz. Okay, they emit 40 hertz, and after a few weeks of this, it can be shown to show a little improvement in the brain, so that the areas of it start firing at roughly 40 hertz. And I'll give you something. Everything likes to fire at roughly the same sort of things in physics, I gather, sort of sync up with each other. So I'm going to give you an example of frequencies not syncing up. I don't know if you remember this. Yeah, it's the old Cadbury's Finger of Fudge advert. Now that sounds quite nice and harmonious and happy, but I'm going to introduce a frequency that doesn't belong there. And you can see how devastatingly horrible that is. And it's a similar situation with this thing that I'm talking about, which is, as I say, physioacoustics. Now, here's another thing. This is an example of science catching up with something that happens in nature already. Now, your family cat does a similar thing. Cats apparently encounter fewer connective tissue problems than human beings do, and that's because they're self-medicating all the time. They're not just getting off their little furry faces on catnip, they're self-medicating in the sense that they purr, and these frequencies move through their bodies and they help to repair them. And also cats have apparently got this thing where they will know if somebody is suffering from something and leap onto the person's lap and do a little bit of purring. And this has therapeutical effects that go way beyond just sound. They're actually vibrations moving through the body. This is a quite extraordinary thing. And it can help with all sorts of things. Apparently there's some evidence that it helps with depression, blood flow, and even Parkinson's disease. Anyway, there's another thing about this, nothing but sound and vibration. You probably will be aware of the fact that if an opera singer sings at a certain pitch that resonates with a glass, they'll sort of eventually they start vibrating together, and this is what shatters the glass. And there's been some extraordinary progress made in the field of using sound to treat various problems. I won't go into, there's all kind of bizarre arcane things like the 11th harmonic, which is a very low harmonic, and you multiply it by 11, and then you've got the very high harmonic, and you can aim this at microorganisms and it destroys them. And and they've done it with leukemia cells. It's an extraordinary thing. And they're using sound and vibration to show that you can really get into some very, very fundamental problems and have some effect. Now, I'm going to move on. Oh yes, no, another thing. But this also has a dark sort of side to it as well. For example, there are parts of the London Underground that a lot of engineers don't like to go in because they think they're haunted. And it turns out the reason for this is because the way that sound is conducted through the London Underground means that there are little pockets of it, little chambers that have ultra low frequencies. And people feel this sense of absolute dread and horror. And apparently this is all down to frequencies. So it can have a dark side as well as a light side as well. In fact, I remember seeing an interview with David Bowie. This is in the mid 1970s, and he was on the Dick Cavett show. And for some reason, Dick Cavett started asking what appeared to be quite a stoned David Bowie all about black noise. And David Bowie was a bit nonplussed, and then gave an absolutely great explanation as to what black noise is. And he said that you could actually freely buy a patent for it. And it was a sort of experimental warfare where vibration was used. And the theory was that it could actually reduce a whole city to nothing. So that's another example of sound, but that's a rather darker use of it. But that destructive element of sound could be used to destroy things that are our enemies as well, which is quite an interesting thing. Now, moving on to the next section of this. So we've looked a little bit at how sound can be used in medicine and various aspects of our lives in that way. But what about the therapeutic power of no sound at all, of absolute silence? Because we live in an era where we've got lots of electronic gizmos, and they're all able to fill up every moment of our waking life with some sort of sound input. And I think we've kind of lost track of the importance of silence. I'm always telling my kids about the importance of silence, because basically if things are coming into you all the time, it's very hard for anything to actually come out of you. You've got to kind of have a break where it's just you. In fact, there are some people who are, in fact, very, very phobic of silence. And the fear of silence is actually called sedatophobia. Incidentally, hippomonstrous sesquipedalia phobia is, you've guessed it, it is the fear of long words, which doesn't seem particularly fair at all, does it? Anyway, sedate phobia, the fear of silence, is increasing in our society. I think we need silence more than ever. And I think one person that really understood this very well was the American composer John Cage. Now, John Cage came up with lots of amazing ideas and came up with lots of very strange avant-garde music. But in 1952, he devised a piece called 4 minutes 33 seconds. Now, you'll have all probably heard of this piece, but none of you will have actually heard it, because it's 4 minutes 33 seconds of complete silence. And I've actually got the 12-inch dance remix of it, which is called 10 minutes 49 seconds. It's very good. In fact, I played at a wedding once, and the father of the bride asked me to play it for 1.5 hours. I'm not entirely sure it was a particularly complimentary thing now I look back at it. Anyway, so yes, it's often given, 4 minutes 33 seconds is often given as an example of the eccentricity and the charlatanism of the avant-garde. It's the same example as how can a pile of bricks be sculpture? How can a period of silence be considered music? Well, in any traditional sense, it can't really be considered music. But that's not what John Cage was interested in. If you go and see a performance of 4 minutes 33, often what you see is somebody lifting the lid on the piano, a pianist coming on, and then they do absolutely nothing for 4 minutes and 33 seconds. And that's the point of it, is that you're not doing something during that period. And it's one of the only times where there's a performance where the usual transaction between the audience and the performer is completely suspended, because in that period of time, all you're doing is just sitting there, and as hippie-ish as it might sound, you're just experiencing the world around you. So for example, maybe if you see this in a concert hall, the sounds you'll hear are things like somebody shifting in their seat, or there's always coughing at concerts. People always have a cough. And then if it falls really quiet, then you can start listening to like the nervous system of the building around you. You can hear the heating pipes, or maybe there's a light that's putting out an electrical hum or something like that. If you're really lucky, somebody farts, which can be hilarious. But the point of the thing is that you are homing in a meditative way on all of the sounds and the music that is inherent in your life. And I think this is a very important thing, and I think can help people now to just stop, to turn things off and just be in the moment. It's very fashionable, it's very mindful, but I think we need it very, very much at the moment. And also, you know, if I could just pass on any information, download or listen to some 40 hertz sound waves, because that will do you some good. I think I used to be a little bit skeptical of this thing, and Scott may say I've put out a lot of dangerous misinformation, and hopefully some of that isn't completely wacky and crazy. But I think it just shows you just how important sound can be in our lives. And if anybody wants to ask me about any of these sources, I'll be happy to pass them on to you. But that's everything from me now. And until I play for you another few tunes later on, I hope you've enjoyed this talk. I hope it made some sense. And I'll hand you back to John. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Glenn. Sound is important, is it? Look, I've got this fancy mic here. When I first
very fancy,
everyone said that it didn't make any difference, but that's because I plugged it into the wrong bit of the laptop. But yeah, sound, it really matters. And the silence as well, I think, so valuable. And just a tip, if you're booking speakers in future and you've got a big musical event and you want to book Elton John, save some money and book Glen instead. What's not to like? I could hardly tell the difference. And also, you know, if you do, you will have the word fart in a public speech. And I think that's the first time I've ever heard the word. And possibly, anyway, let's move on. Let's move on, in fact, away from the X-rated crotch of Barry Gibbs to the Arctic. Let's trek across the Arctic in -40 centigrade. Let's imagine we are. Let's imagine we're swimming the Channel. Let's imagine we are swimming around Manhattan Island. Well, you don't have to. You can hear all about it because our next speaker has done these things. She's a big noise in the world of diversity, which is such an important thing. And we spoke about that in previous conferences, haven't we? So she's got expertise on that, but she's here more to focus on resilience and energizing. It's a theme, isn't it? And it's never been more of a theme. So let's welcome now, ahead of our next break, when you can keep the questions coming in. We've got questions for all our speakers, but ahead of the next break, let's hear now about resilience, energizing, swimming, the Arctic, the co-founder and MD of Mixed Diversity Developers, Hayley Barnard.
Thanks, John. Hi, everybody. Did anyone have one of those mums that used to give advice, like even when you weren't looking for it? I had one of those mums. My mum used to say, Hayley, if you don't ask, you don't get. She was Welsh. My twin sister and I were given up for adoption and ended up with a lovely family from Wales. And my mum, the very first time I remember her saying this was after the ballet teacher had asked her to remove me from the class and never return me again. She thought it'd be a good idea if I took up swimming. So I remember being entered in my first swimming gala, probably about the age of 7, standing at the side of the pool, ready to go. And I looked at the marshal with the starting gun and I said, what stroke do we have to do? I really wasn't sure what I was supposed to be doing. He said, oh, it's freestyle. The gun goes, I dive in, I swim my little heart out, lungs bursting, touch the wall at the other end, look to my left, look to my right. I can't believe it. I've won my first ever swimming race. Except I hadn't. It was at that point that a very large bosomed lady leant over the top of me and pointed down and said, disqualified. You see, it turned out that when he said freestyle, I didn't know what that meant. I thought it meant you could do anything. And so it turns out that you get disqualified if you do a full length underwater without coming up for a breath, doing dolphin kick. I got out of the water and burst into tears, not actually because I'd been disqualified, but because I really wanted the fresh milk t-shirt that the winner got. And that's when my mum said, Hayley, if you don't ask, you don't get. And so she marched me up to the marshal's table and said, please can I have a t-shirt, even though I got disqualified. And what do you think they did? They gave me one. They probably had hundreds from the sponsor who were fresh milk. Because if you don't ask, you don't get, do you? Now, I have to say that was the end of my aspirations of being a channel swimmer at that point. I never did swimming again, never learned to swim properly. I could obviously swim, you know, but it really wasn't until I was in my 40s that I thought maybe I'll revisit that dream I had of swimming the English Channel. When my teenagers roll their eyes at me now, when I say things like, if you don't ask, you don't get, I ignore it. Because some of those things that our parents said that annoyed us, they stick with us, don't they? And they're really valuable sometimes. They were certainly really valuable in my first job. I think I must have been very overconfident as a young person. I got my dream job straight out of university working for Sir Blythe on the BT Global Challenge yacht race. And I wasn't on the fun side, the boating side. I drove a desk, not a boat. And I was the PA to the general manager at the time. And her job was to keep the boats moving in between the 4-year yacht races. But after I'd been there a year, she left. And so started the discussions with her successor, who had been running a small airline. And they couldn't agree on a price for the salary. So I got busy writing myself a little business plan for these yachts in between the yacht races, and asked for a meeting with the chief exec and the finance director, because if you don't ask, you don't get, do you? And I said, yeah, that job, yeah, I've got an idea. I think I could do it. And here's my business plan of how I can reduce costs and I can increase our turnover. Will you give me a year's chance? And to my complete shock and horror, they did. Now, if anyone was ever meant to have imposter syndrome, it should have been me. I did not deserve to be there. I was too young. I had no management experience, but I did give it my all. And actually, it turned out to be really successful, because there's so often opportunities in change, aren't there? There was this opportunity as a result of that lady leaving. But actually, right now, as a business owner, I'm thinking there's a lot of opportunities going around at the moment. It's just finding them, because they're a bit hidden under all this other stuff that's going on. And it's hard, but last year for 3 months, all of our work stopped just overnight. We had the bookings, but our clients, who are all global organizations, were too busy trying to sort out where their staff were going to work from and how they were going to keep everybody safe. They didn't have any time to be training them on diversity and inclusion or writing their diversity and inclusion strategy. But amazingly, that was a great opportunity for us to down tools, to take stock, to see what the opportunities were, and actually look at, you know, who really are our profitable customers, and let's combine that with who do we like working with. That's the great thing, isn't it, about being an SME, if you're an SME owner or you work in an SME. It also made us look really closely at the way we operated, and we realized that we didn't like the way that our relationship was with some of our customers. So we asked them to work differently with us, because if you don't ask, you don't get. And that worked great too. And we found some new products and opportunities. Just like Angie's been describing, there's great opportunities that come out of change, aren't there? The trouble is, we often don't take them. We can have these ideas in our head, like, I want to swim the channel, but we don't go for it. Same in business. So often we have that great idea in the shower and then we think, oh, I don't know if I can go for it. And I found myself wondering, why do we do that? Is it inhibition or is it prohibition? Who says, I can't be the new general manager because I'm young? Who says, is it inhibition or is it prohibition? Who says we can't invite our worst awkward clients to go and work with our competitors? Who says that? Is it inhibition or is it prohibition? There's never anything stopping us. That's the conclusion I've come to. It's nearly always inhibition that stops us from doing the things we want to do. We have these great plans, particularly at this time of the year. We're going to get fit and lose weight and all that sort of stuff. And then the little voice comes in. Do you know the little voice? The one I'm talking about? You can't do this. Look, you're just going to fall off the wagon in a week anyway. You might as well stop now. Anyone thinking, what little voice? I haven't got a little voice. It's that one. That's the little voice inside your head. And it's really cruel. Should we do a little experiment and see how cruel the little voice is in your head? Maybe yours isn't. You see, that little voice, if I were to ask you a question, what would it say if you've just made a mistake in front of others? I'm looking at my fellow people that I can see on Zoom here, who are our hosts and our other speakers. What do you say to yourself when you're doing something for the first time and finding it difficult? Oh, come on, Hayley, don't be stupid. You can do this. What about when you're called into an unexpected meeting? Well, Scott's already answered that one. His boss called him in. He said, I think I'm going to be fired. What about if we spin this? And I said to you, what would you say to your friend when they've just made a mistake in front of others? It's all right. You can do it. What would you say to your friend if they're finding something difficult for the first time? Keep going. It's all right. What about if they got called in to an unexpected meeting and they don't know why? Maybe you're going to get a pay rise. Maybe you're going to get a promotion. Maybe that client's going to ask for an extended contract or to put you on a retainer. Isn't it interesting? We are so mean to ourselves. We've got to learn to tame what I call the little bully. That little bully that whispers in my ears and tells me I'm not good enough to do it. I'm not good enough to win a blooming swimming race. How could I ever swim the channel? How often do we not support ourselves, but we actually sabotage ourselves? I'm privileged to get to work with boards of directors of often global corporations, some of the best known brands in the world. And I always ask them about this topic of the little bully. And it always surprises me that even the most senior people, some of the most experienced people, the most authoritative, the most in command, they know that little bully's voice as well. It's not unique to you. It's not unique to me. It's something we've all got. In fact, all of these people have said that the little bully speaks to them. All of these people said, I get imposter syndrome. So what's the imposter syndrome or imposterism? Because it's not really a syndrome, medically speaking. Well, it's when you think others have an inflated opinion of your abilities. It's also when you fear that your true abilities will be found out. And what about this one? Tendency to attribute success to an external factor. How often have you just said, oh, I was just lucky? We had a really great Q4 last year. And I found myself saying, we were just really lucky. It played into our hands. Actually, no, we went out and we designed some new products and services and we worked really hard. How often do we attribute success to someone else? So imposterism is that kind of feeling that you're going to get found out. They're going to tap on your shoulder any moment. Maybe Angie's even had this in her big role. Someone's going to tap on her shoulder one day and go, what are you doing here? Do you think you deserve to be here? Of course she deserves to be there. Absolutely, she deserves to be there. And yet that's not often what we tell ourselves. So we have to stop this sabotaging self-talk because frankly, things are crap enough at the moment, aren't they, without us beating ourselves up? We don't need this going on in our lives. What do? Well, you spin it. You start by catching yourself in the act. Start learning to tap into that little bully, the little voice that whispers to you. Then you stop yourself and you spin it to a more positive version. This happened only last night to me. I said to my husband, I'm talking at GDB tomorrow and I don't even know why they want me to speak. Most of my speaking is about diversity and inclusion. I don't often speak about things like the Arctic because that's kind of my hobby stuff. But, I said, I just don't think I can do it. And then I stopped myself and I thought, actually, I have done talks like this before. And at least one person has messaged me and said it helped them. So I know it's worth at least giving it a go. I'm going to give it my best shot. And it's 18 minutes where I'm going to try and lay it all on the table for you. And that's what we need to do, sometimes minute by minute at the moment. That's what I'm finding anyway. I can do this. Now, my company Mix, we sometimes do some crazy, totally seemingly unrelated to diversity and inclusion work. And this particular one was for a company where we were going to take a load of their women across Antarctica. So we were going to select and train up loads of women, and then they were going to sponsor us to take their women across Antarctica, and it was going to be a gender parity story. Great event. We spent 3 years doing this deal, and finally we had it all secured on top of the £1 million sponsorship that this company were going to pay us. We had all sorts of other deals and partnerships going on. We were ready to launch it to the company. We had a big town hall event booked. And 2 nights before we were due to go live, someone somewhere got nervous about it in the company and thought, what if someone dies? What if one of our women dies? Maybe we shouldn't do this project. And almost seemingly overnight, 3 years' work disappeared, and we lost our sponsor, and the project couldn't go ahead. And the team had worked so hard on securing this sponsor and getting everything ready. And I went into work and I found myself for quite a long time actually going, oh, I can't believe it. I can't believe this has happened. We've done so much work on this. And I was whinging about the sponsor and this, that, and the other. And everybody else started to do it. And I realized I was handing out whinge vouchers effectively. I was giving people license to whinge. And it occurred to me when I got asked to do this talk, this would be a really good thing to bring up, my mistake with these whinge vouchers, because it is pretty hard right now. But there is nothing to be gained from whinging about it. The worst thing we can do is whinge and give everybody else who we work with the license to whinge, because we're either a radiator or a drain, aren't we? We either warm people up or we drain them of energy. And I want to be someone who energizes people. So I am not handing out any whinge vouchers this COVID crisis. I am going for it on the positivity, because I believe that positivity is contagious. It is absolutely contagious. You know, when you meet that person who's just, you know, they're really contagious. Now, yes, they can be a bit irritating sometimes, let's be honest about that. But actually, I'd still prefer that over someone who just goes, yeah, I don't know, we're stuffed. We've lost it. I don't know what we're going to do. So no handing out whinge vouchers. That's been my top tip so far, and it's been working really well during this COVID. Back to that imposter syndrome thing and this idea, if you don't ask, you don't get. I've realized throughout my 30s and into my 40s that it wasn't actually about what do you ask of others. It's quite often about what am I going to ask of myself? I don't have the same arrogance of youth that I had to keep asking other people all the time. Now I've turned inwards and I'm thinking, what can I ask of myself? Now, I said at the beginning, I've got a twin. I've actually got an identical twin. Google her. She's absolutely amazing. There's currently a Hollywood film being made about her story because she rowed across the Atlantic Ocean, started with a husband. He got scared. He was an international oarsman and he took his little wifey with him, and he had to be rescued, and she carried on her own and rowed across the Atlantic. Now, the thing is, me and my twin are quite different, genetically identical, but we're very different. When we were at school, Deborah was the sporty one and I was the brainy one. And we pursued that as an opportunity in life. And she really is an amazing sportswoman. She loves kind of adventure and hardcore stuff. She's basically done a major adventure every year of her life. In fact, it's even written on her business card, professional adventurer. That's how good she is. And I don't know about you, but given the choice of a cold tent or a hotel, preferably one with quite a few stars, I'm in the hotel camp. I don't know about you. I'm not in the tent camp. Anyway, my twin sister for years has been going on about going on an adventure with her, and I refuse to do it because it's not my thing. I know my strengths, and I'm not the sporty one. I'm the brainy one. How often do we believe those silly little lies from our childhood that are actually founded in not very much fact? So I let my sister talk me into going on this Arctic expedition. We moved it from Antarctica up to the Arctic. We found ourselves another sponsor. We from the car industry. We trained up a whole team of women who had applied, and I was effectively one of the team. My sister had agreed that I should go along with her because I've been having a pretty bad time. My kids had just been diagnosed with autism, both of them, and life was tough. And she said, you should try something different. When times are tough, it's a really good idea to do something you never normally do. So I stuck to my training plan. It was all going well until a week before we were due to fly to the Arctic, when my sister sent me these messages, text messages with photos from her latest ski holiday, and she'd broken her leg. The professional adventurer who was leading our expedition had broken her leg. Panic, what are we going to do? What is the sponsor going to say? Who's going to lead the expedition? Oh no. And it suddenly occurred to me that, okay, we had some professional polar explorers who were coming with us who had guns because of the polar bears and so on. But in terms of the team, suddenly found myself thrust into a position I would never, ever have chosen. Landing on some sea ice after 5 flights up into the Arctic Circle, landing just off Baffin Island, the most amazing place in the world, and totally feeling like I didn't belong. My imposter syndrome was through the roof, and once again, it deserved to be, quite frankly. It's hard to describe what it's like being in the Arctic on expedition when it's -40 and it's blowing a gale. I think probably the best way of describing it is to imagine you're sitting in this car. You're in the back, you wind the window down and you stick your head out, and the snow bites into your skin, and within a minute, the numbness in your face becomes painful. And actually, if you leave it more than maybe 10 minutes, you start to get little blackened stripes on your face where the frost nip is starting to attack. And it's genuinely painful when it's that cold. So it felt like I was in this car, and even worse, there was a polar bear trying to get in and he was trying to eat us. This is exactly what it felt like to be on expedition in the Arctic Circle, and totally out of my comfort zone. It is not a comfortable place to be. I'd love to say that I became the adventurer, but I didn't. I hated every moment of it. And then at the very last minute, I realized it wasn't as bad as I thought it was. And unfortunately, it took me until the last day to make up this scale in my head. If 1 is the sun's come out and I'm feeling warm, and 10 is I'm being eaten by a polar bear, I'm probably only on about 4 or 5. And so I use the how bad is it scale now, because I really need it at the moment. It's incredibly valuable, because I then realized that when things are tough like they are now, the comfort zone always shifts. Yes, I've taken a step outside of my comfort zone and I'm doing business different, but eventually this becomes the new comfort zone, doesn't it? The comfort zone always shifts, and there's always opportunity to innovate in that if we can just control the controllables. And so I'm pleased to say, as I came back off that, I decided it was time to fulfill my lifetime ambition. I learned to swim in my early 40s and finally realized my ambition of not only swimming around Manhattan 47 kilometers, but swimming the English Channel, because I genuinely believe we are capable of so much more hardship if we just are prepared to believe and ignore the little bully. So John, back to you.
I don't know quite where to begin with there, Hayley. The slides, we're still seeing them, so you might want to just unshare them now, but those slides had quite an impact. And the phrase, you don't ask, you don't get, the repetition of it is very powerful for me. Very brief story, if I may. 2-3 years ago, I'm at my first GDB networking event, a little bit out of the comfort zone. I'm quite new at the whole business thing. And I hear that there are events, they need hosts, all this sort of thing. So I think, and I ask, anyway, who should I mention? Someone says, oh, Sally Brownover. So I go up to Sally and introduce myself and try and make a good impression and say, if you're ever looking for someone to host an event, well, you can see where this ended up. You're stuck with me. But it was a, if you don't ask, you don't get moment. And the little bully moment there, that resounded with me. Within the last hour, I have been kicking myself, Angie, for getting your title wrong. And I'm not joking. That for me is a big deal. I'm a professional, accurate person as a journalist, and we don't like to do things like that. But I'm thinking to myself, actually, let it go. Don't beat yourself up over little details. So you, Hayley, have given me some very useful thoughts today as well. And we're back on air. You got the hang of this now, and time, almost time actually, for our question and answer session when all of our speakers are here on the screen for you to fire questions at. We've also got Jeff, of course, because he'll be saying a few words at the end. I dare say a question to him, welcome as well, but it's mainly for the panel. Now, just want to go back to that if you don't ask, you don't get theme, because there's been a perfect example in the last half hour. Scott sent me a note saying, John, thanks for the big shout out for my video. Could you mention my YouTube channel? And well, I did check with the bosses and the answer was a big fat yes. So if you want to see this great how to do virtual presentation promo video, Scott McArthur, youtube.com/Scott McArthur. And then almost before I got the question out, Sally said, and if you want to mention yours too, John, you can. So here we are. Mine is John Young Media, youtube.com, John Young Media. So after this, go away, have a good look at them, compare them, and have some bit of fun with that. Now, the question answer, I love this Slido. I love this Slido because rather than just guessing the room and reading the room and thinking, oh, where do we start? And then hearing a question, you can't quite hear it. And then something else is a bit awkward. We don't have to because we know what's gone down well and what hasn't. So keep sending questions in. If you want someone particularly to answer it, make that point. But let's start off right now. We're going to be doing our Q&A until 20 past. So we've got a good half hour, all going nicely. Let's start with that question from Anya that I mentioned. It was an observation, really. It's National Hug Day. As we're remote and distancing, how can we send good vibes to everyone? And I'm thinking, let's ask each of our four panelists this question. And Angie, we haven't heard from you for the longest time. So you've got all those staff, you can't see them face to face. How do you send good vibes to people?
We do it in lots of different ways. We try to, so even though we've got a sort of 1,000 support staff at the moment who are working from home, the majority of our staff, 6,500 of staff, are still out working every day on the front line running that train service. So a lot of our managers are still there. So for us, it's that face-to-face type of reassurance, that contact that we have with managers out there. So I think really there's a couple of things that we've done as well. For my own team, we have a check-in session where every week it's really informal. They can come along with a glass of wine on a Friday and just really saying how they're feeling. And it's something that the word we haven't mentioned today, but I think is quite important, about creating a psychological space for people to be able to feel that they can share their failings. And that is I can see Hayley nodding her head. You know, we talked a lot about great things today as organisations we can do with our different leadership style. But for me, it's about creating that psychological space for people to feel safe, that they can tell you about what they're feeling, what they're thinking. And when you create that, that's amazing.
It is psychological space. Scott, let me go to you. What do you make of that? How can you giving us your experiences about business?
Yeah.
How do you manage this one?
Well, I mean, it's funny, yesterday watching Amanda Gorman on the presidential inauguration. I'm a huge poetry fan, and I quite often use that to help people see things a little bit differently, because poetry is about the inner thoughts and rather than the usual external stuff. And there's a piece of poetry by a fella who I love, and I know him personally. He's a guy called David White, and he says, start close in with the step you don't want to take. Start close in with the step you don't want to take. And when I'm speaking to people, I tend to adopt that. You know, I get them to say, okay, you know, what don't you want to do? So it resonates quite a bit with what Hayley said, I think, in her talk. So that's how I would encourage it. And I mean, the other one that's another piece of poetry is listening is touching at a distance.
Yes, that's a good.
That's not a published piece. That's not, but it is from something else. But it's beautiful, isn't it? You know,
I suppose it's about showing that you're listening. Glenn, we thoroughly enjoyed listening to you. How would you send out positive vibes to people? And start by unmuting yourself, of course, otherwise we won't hear you.
There you go.
Okay.
Well, it's Hug Day today. I think it was World Cheese Day yesterday, wasn't it? So I mean, you could just get a cheese and hug it or something. I think that's one thing. One thing that's happening with me at the moment, because I'm not working very much, is that I'm doing an awful lot of homeschooling, and I've just there's my daughter there. She's put her thumb up. That was a positive thing. She's put her thumb up, and it's quite a tough thing. You know, they're very, very good at pushing buttons. They're just absolutely wonderful. My wife has been doing a course of positive parenting, and I just realized how many negative things I say, you know, don't do that, that's a 7, not a 6, you don't spell you know, silly that way or whatever. And the whole thing has sort of turned things on its head, because I've started just being relentlessly, monotonously positive about everything. And they're being lovely. It's, you know, I don't like to, I mean, there's something wood here. I nearly touched Barry Gibbs' crutch for luck then, but I'm actually trying to touch wood. Things are going okay. So I could just say that get yourself on a positive parenting course if you're doing a lot of homeschooling and you're finding that it's very trying, and that could do wonders for you, because it's done wonders for us.
That'll help with the positive vibes. Hayley, you're used to staff and dealing with their emotions and issues around that. How are you at the moment when you're not face to face with it? And how are you handling the situation, sending out those positive vibes that Angie wants to hear about?
Yeah, we've done a few things recently. We've started actually communicating more. So we've gone on to using more WhatsApp groups, but for silliness. They're not for work. You can't send anything related to work. You just send stupid things, because there is evidence that looking at cat and dog videos does actually release serotonin. It actually makes you feel better. So I think any excuse to watch cat and dog videos is good.
That's great, and encourage your staff to do so. But during working hours, actually, out of interest, would you make a distinction, or would you just be a bit more?
No, because we don't do working hours. We get the work done when it needs, and that's it. That's it. It doesn't matter when you do it, which is really what we all need at the moment, because people are trying to homeschool their kids. They don't want to be tied to the desk 9 to 5. If the work gets done, we're happy.
It's a whole different world, isn't it? That's great. Thanks for those answers to that question. Annie, I hope that has given you some of the answers that you wanted for, and all the people who voted. 8 people voted for that question. 6 people have voted for this question from Jeremy Taylor, formerly of this parish. Jeremy's asking, well, Angie, this is aimed at you. So let's take your answer. And if others want to chip in, we will, but otherwise we'll move it in to get through as many questions as we can. If you want to answer, panel, put your hand up and loud and clear and sort of to say, I want to add something. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next question. But Angie, over to you. Here's the question. Do you think the agility and speed of decision-making that you've experienced at Southern and Gatwick Express and others have adopted will continue post-COVID?
Yes, I really do, because I think I said when I was sort of in my piece about, you know, the railway is quite clunky, it's very old, it's very traditional, we've got set ways of doing things, which, to be quite honest, I found quite frustrating in my 20 years on the railway, and that's one of the reasons that keeps me here, because I'm determined to change it. And I do have, you know, every small success along the way is a great success for me. What's incredible about this is people's different change in mindset about working from home. You know, pre-COVID, anyone working from home, there was this conscious bias that they were probably skiving, not even an unconscious, it was a real, oh, they can't work from home, they're not going to do it. And when we moved to working from home, it was like, there's no way the train planning team can do what they can do from home. They need to be in an office. And what we've realised is everybody is more than capable of working at home. And actually, they probably do more when they work at home. So the challenge I've had is saying to my guys, don't work so much. Make sure you take that break at lunchtime. Send me photos of the walk that you've been on so I can see that you've got out and you've done things. So I think for the industry now as a whole, we have demonstrated that we can do things quicker when we get out of that pity fest, you know, stop giving out those pity vouchers, and we get with a can do, we can do this attitude. So that, you know, when we set up COVID, I said there were 4 stages to COVID. There was the react at the beginning, there was the stabilize, there was the recover, and there's the enhance. And the enhance bit is about taking everything that's good out of this and make sure we keep doing it, because we know people aren't going to go back to commuting 5 days a week. So we've got to do things differently. So yes, we have to be agile, we have to change. And actually for me, it's the first time the railway in a long time has had a kick up the butt, and they've got to do things differently.
Can we quote you on that? Can I send that into my former colleagues in the newsroom, Angie?
Maybe not. Maybe I'll restate it slightly, but as we're with friends, yeah, maybe I'll be slightly more diplomatic outside of this forum.
Really interesting to hear that, Angie. Thank you. Let's throw a couple of questions at Glen now. A couple of popular questions have come in. Stefan from Storm 12, of whom I have a great soft spot. Take a look at my website and my marketing. That's thanks to my friends at Storm 12. Certainly my marketing branding is. It's about the music, Glen. How do you think we can use the power of sound and music in our everyday remote working environment? And there's a follow-up also from, we don't know who asked this, but it's anonymous, but here it is. Would you suggest music in the office? And if so, what style? So those two questions come together really, don't they? Glen, over to you.
Well, I'll answer the first one. I'm not an expert in this, but I have been looking into music in the office, and there's a very, very good YouTube post which is called, The Power of Sound, an eye-opening video. And I would absolutely recommend it because it's a talk all about how sound is being used in retail. There's kind of like a revolution going on with that, and also how sound can impact people in the office. And I think their findings said something that a level between 45 and 55 decibels was quite good for people, because it depends on what the sound is. If it's say something like birds, I know it's a cliche, but people really like the sound of birds singing, and there's a sound evolutionary reason for that, because when the birds are singing, everything is okay, there aren't predators about to take a bite out of you and things like that. So a lot of those old cliches are good. And I think if there's some evidence that if things are too quiet in the office, sometimes that's an inhibiting factor. If somebody has to take a phone call, they're sort of wondering whether everybody can hear them. Obviously, if things are too loud, if there's loud bangs, you get the release of cortisol and fatty acids going into your bloodstream, and all the fight and flight kicks in. Even when there's nothing to fight or nothing to fly away from, those sounds can impact. And so there's a lot of kind of research as to, obviously this is probably going to vary from room to room because people have different needs, but yeah, there's quite a lot of research and work being done on that as we speak. And what was the other question?
Oh, let me see. I'm just looking at it here. Oh, I've lost it.
Is it general well-being with music?
Yes. How can it help well-being generally?
Well, yeah, one thing that I know a few people are doing is they're joining online choirs. My wife's church, and it was very difficult, and we'd spend most of the time sort of plugging things in before, and then we'd sing sort of like half a song or something like that. But that was great, particularly in the first wave of the pandemic. I'm sure there are a lot of these things about. I think choirs are very fashionable, very, but not just fashionable, very, very healthy and very good things to get involved with. And it's a way of doing music where you don't have to be that good at it. It's where the community side of it comes in. Also, I mean, there's another thing. I know a lot of people have difficulty sort of motivating themselves and launching into work. And I think one thing that's very handy, there's a lot of research to say that not only listening to music, but learning a musical instrument is very, very good, because the imaging of people's brains when they're listening to music is one thing, but the imaging of them when they're actually playing an instrument is something else. It fires off all different sections of your brain that don't usually work together. And well, my wife said, thank God I do play a musical instrument, because I imagine how stupid I'd be if I wasn't doing that. But we'll glance over that. But yeah, learning a musical instrument. And it could be like a kazoo or something like that, but it's something to do with the way you're coordinating a physical action and coordinating an intellectual action. If you learn how to read a bit of music, that's not that hard, Yeah. So that could work.
Great stuff. Learn a musical instrument. Be aware of its power. Stefan, hope that's helpful. And again, I seem to be plugging loads of videos at the moment, but there's a great video on Storm 12's website selling their marketing. And what's the secret ingredient? Music. I watched it a few months ago, and I tell you what, it was in my head for the next couple of days. So actually it was really irritating, but no, really powerful, really effective, really shows the power of music in marketing. That's the sidebar there, and a plug for Storm 12. Now then, let's throw some questions at Scott. Can you reiterate, Scott, the qualities of a gardener? And there's a follow-up question which was popular. Do you think, Jim, sharing that phone call to the sales director made them more accountable? So let's do the gardener first.
Well, the gardener metaphor, I've been thinking about it for a while. and I can't find anything wrong with it. You know, I've thought about it and Jim and I have spoken about it. And if you think about it, you have to think about the seasons, you have to think about preparation, you have to practice, you have to move plant. I mean, I've got 4 raised beds in my back garden, and I'm not a gardener. I don't know anything about gardening, but I know enough that I know I can't put tatties in the same raised bed each year, or they just don't thrive. You have to move them around. So you see where this is going. It just doesn't break down anywhere if you think about it in terms of the organization. You can get infestations. You can get, you can think about, how do you stop that infestation, which could be someone else from another product coming into the market, I think it's a fairly strong metaphor. I mean, I've got a little greenhouse, and you can force things there, but it doesn't always work, does it? Because if you get a pot of basil from a supermarket, you know what happens, don't you? It dies because it's been force grown. So there's all sorts of things, and I just think it's quite a nice and helpful metaphor for leaders to think about. You're never really offended by a gardener, are you? It's usually quite positive. So I'm fairly, at the moment, I mean, I'm always looking for things wrong with it, and there may be a couple of things, but I'm struggling to find many, to be honest. Okay. So yeah, I think it's quite a strong metaphor.
It is a strong metaphor. Yeah. What about this question from Tim Fifield Britweb? Do you think Jim sharing that phone call to sales director made them more accountable?
I think so. I mean, there's a little bit of a backstory, of course. I mean, Jim's whole persona, I mean, he's 6'4", he's built like a brick house, and yet he's the quietest man. He's really quiet, but I remember he's actually he's retired now, but he's actually a person who goes into companies to save companies, usually in manufacturing, although he does some financial services work as well. And you would walk in and you would think, who's this Humpty Dumpty just walking into the office? And yet his wisdom, his calmness, his kindness, I think the kindness thing really, really shines through. I mean, I've done probably about, 2 or 3 years of my career in manufacturing, and it's not always kind. You're often, taking people on, laying them off, very difficult. But Jim always did it in a beautiful way. And we did lots of things that were really kind. We cared about our people. And I think that's probably where I would leave that, John.
Kindness is a key ingredient to all business, isn't it?
Yeah.
It may not seem so. Hayley, we've got a couple of questions coming for you here. Tony Darton from Sussex Community Foundation, a great organisation I've had the pleasure of working with briefly, if I may say so. Hayley, do you think it's better to try to beat the bully up when it strikes, or ignore it? Isn't that interesting? Should you beat it up or ignore it? Or do you have some other simple technique for shutting up that little bully?
Okay, I think it's both. So the thing about the thought you just had, once you notice the little bully, it's a thought. It's not a fact, it's a thought. And so we can replace thoughts with better thoughts. So that's why the spin it things work. But actually, sometimes it is quite hard work. If you genuinely struggle with imposter syndrome, you do sometimes have to be a bit more conscious about the way you deal with it. So a couple of other tips that really help with the bully is to keep a journal, or actually writing down your achievements. So I've been keeping a list of COVID achievements because I sometimes get to the end of the day and feel like I haven't done anything at the moment. All I've done is manage to get through a bit of GCSE maths, which frankly is enough for anyone. And it's really helpful to look back over the last few weeks and say, look, I did that. And I actually have a list of my achievements in total. Like I keep a list at the front of my year diary of things I've done in the past, because sometimes we just need reminding of how capable we are. So that's just one little tip about that. And we know that works for overcoming imposter syndrome, is looking for facts, because those thoughts, they're not facts.
Use facts, use the evidence. Got another question for you, Hayley, and then we're going to go open up the room again. It's from Barney, this one. Very interesting, I'm married to a triplet, so I can relate to this. Having an identical twin must be the ultimate personal branding challenge. Isn't that great? And here's, I think, why the reason I picked this question, because I think we can all get something out of this. How do you stand out online and build your own brand?
Yeah, actually, it'd be quite interesting to see what people think when they look at my website versus my twin sister's website. She's the most prolific female speaker outside of the US. So she's unbelievable, but she's quite modest as well. No one really knows her. I think having a sense of identity online is actually not, it's not sometimes what people make it out to be. It's not writing a gazillion LinkedIn articles. I've never written a LinkedIn article in my life, because it's like being in a sea of, it's like you're one boat in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. How are people going to find you? And actually, they need to remember you. That's why I wear huge glasses. I mean, I do have bad eyesight. When I'm not on screen, I wear these ones, which are really boring. But I don't want to be seen as someone who's really boring. So I wear my big glasses, because this is one of my trademarks. So you find little trademarks that become your thing online. And I think the same can be multiplied up for a company. How do we stand out? How do we do something that's just a little bit different that makes people remember us? That's why I'm really open about things like being adopted, because people remember that. And also, the more vulnerable I am online and in presentations like this, I give license to other people to be vulnerable too. And I think that's a gift.
If I may say, you gave me license to be vulnerable as well. And when you mentioned that you weren't sure about yesterday talked to your husband, that was so, I think, reassuring for all of us. And boy, did you still, deliver some great material as well. Material sounds like a rock band, but you know what I mean. Right, we are now going to shake things up a bit and move into the 30-second challenge section of our Q&A. I have a pinger here, and we're going to use some of the questions where each of the panelists can give us an answer. So when they hear that, it means, thanks, that was great. We'll move on to the next answer now. So, and I checked in advance and everyone's up for this, in case it sounds awfully rude, but again, it's going back to my DNA TV news where everything has to be timed to the second. Right, question is, 6 people voted for this, from Mark Vason from Tomango. Great speakers, one and all. I think we all agree with that. What is your top tip in 30 seconds for making a remote presentation as energized and engaging as an in-person one? So let's go in the order we heard first. So Angie, you're first up for the 30-second challenge. How do you make these things engaging?
Oh gosh, that's really difficult. I'm glad I go first. I'm using up my 30 seconds. Prep well, think about your audience, and make it look like it's as natural as possible. That you're not reading from a script if possible, hopefully.
That's always the trick, isn't it? And I put you on the spot by asking you first there. That was well under 30, and I'm not going to be too strict. Okay, let's go now to Glen. What's your secret, do you think?
Well, John, I can't really take any credit for anything that happened, because I would just recommend that you sit in front of an effigy of Barry Gibbs Crutch, and that takes a lot of the heat off of you personally, and any lack of, nobody here suffers from a lack of charisma or anything, but I think that it's done me a lot of good, and I don't really have any more answers to that really, so I'll have to just fill out the rest of the time with some very nice bells.
Well, I think personally, what you've done is raised online presentations to a different dimension by just bringing in the music and having a few props. And Scott, I don't want to steal your thunder, but you've got props and you've dressed the back there. And what would your answer be there?
I mean, I'm always surprised when I have to say this to people, but the best thing to do is tell your own stories. Be an archaeologist of your own life and tell those stories, because people remember your stories. And if you're not sure, one of the ways I teach people and coach people to tell stories is to use artifacts. This is my artifact wall. For every presentation I do, this is a different wall. It depends on the presentation, and it helps me remember what I'm going to say. You can see my talk behind me. Yeah, so that's how I do it. But be an archaeologist of your own life.
And I suppose my contribution to that would be, yes, and you touched upon it there, props, use props, have props, have things, you've got them behind you there, you've brought them to the party, if you like. I think, I hope, get back, I hope that answered the question for you. If not, send another note and we can follow it up. But let me see, let's get another one here now. This comes it's a question for Hayley from Jaffa. Lockenweiler, lovely guy, I've met many times. Love the takeaways from your talk, Hayley. Very positive delivery. Here's a question. What pursuits have you got planned for the future that take you out of your comfort zone? Right, and we give you lots of material for your next talk.
30 seconds. No, I tell you what I'd really love to do next. There's something in the swimming marathon world called the Triple Crown. I've done 2 of the 3 biggest swims. So I've done the English Channel around Manhattan. The third one is the Catalina Channel in California. there's a difference, and the difference is sharks. So I'm still trying to get my head around doing this one, because it's the same length as the channel, but it involves a whole load of wildlife that I don't want to get chummy with. So I'm learning about sharks, and it really is pushing my fear boundary. So I'm trying to work out, is it the right thing to do or not? No one's ever died doing it, so I'll probably be fine. So that's the next big one on the horizon.
Sharks, that's something for us all to.
But it's
to
more
look out
mental
for.
preparation than physical with that one.
Yes, I think so. Yes, don't let the bully come and tell you not to do it. We want this time next year report back. Scott, Barney wants to know, and this is again a popular question: can and should staff trust HR when they really represent the company's interests? And how can HR be more neutral and employee centric? That probably needs 60-second answer.
Yeah,
off you go.
I'm writing a book about that right now. It depends on HR. HR is different in every business. There are, even if you go across the road, the HR department will be different to the one you've got. So it's a difficult question to answer. However, I think HR should be people-centric. I've always said it, and I don't believe it is at the moment. Generally, as a profession, it's become KPI-centric, as I said in my talk, and it should be people-centric. And I believe another KPI for you is return on humanity. And I think HR could hold a really special part in that, but at the moment, unfortunately, it doesn't. But I will say the HR community have been amazing during COVID. They have been absolutely amazing. So well done them, and I hope it leads to a transformation in the profession. Long way to go.
Angie, let me ask you just off the back of that, and you're muted at the moment, but do you think there has been a transformation in HR that you've observed this year, or could it just be phantom?
Yeah, I think, for us as a company, we had a new CEO come in a couple of years ago, and it's really changed the dynamics of why we think and about empowering our people and moving from what I would call a very sort of autocratic, tell you what you're going to do and how you're going to do it, to an explaining why we're doing things and letting people understand. And we've changed that through all of our HR structures as well. It's, you can imagine we're unionised. We have a policy for absolutely everything that says you will do this, you will do this, you will do this. And we've moved away and really changed our language. I talked about it at the beginning in my speech about how we've used this "We're with you" campaign as our internal campaign, and the whole of the business of we're with you, we're not against you.
Let's hope that is a new way forward as a new age dawns in so many ways this year. Yesterday, no comment. Moving on. Jeff Downs. This could be the last question. Let's do this all four answers in 30 seconds. A bit of fun. Jeff asks, and I'm very interested in hearing the answer to this from all of you. What's it like playing to a camera? That he puts it to you specifically, Glen, with the music, but I would be interested to know what it's like speaking to a camera, delivering a talk down a lens rather than in a big conference room, whether it's got music or not. So the question again, what's it like playing to a camera rather than live in the room audience? Over to you, Glen, as it starts with the issue of music, and then we'll go around the room.
Okay, well, this ties in with the little bully, because my bully, I don't like, my bully's been with me, my whole life. And thanks to Hayley, I'm going to be taking him out the back and shooting him in the back of the head later on today. But the problem is the good thing is with my bully normally is that I can't see him. He's just like a little voice in my head saying, "Oh, Glen, you're talking to loads of people now. Wouldn't it be awful if you just sort of dried in front of them and you kind of went incredibly red and perhaps even started crying?" Now, not only do I have the bully in my head, I can see a little tiny version of me looking back at me and going, "Oh, look at you. Aren't you silly? You silly man," like that. And so that's the main challenge for me, is the fact that I can actually see the little bully as well. And so I'm going to put my hand over him like that for a second. Thank God for that, he's gone.
Well, we don't want you to go quite yet. Angie, how have you addressed this whole issue of looking down a lens and communicating down a lens?
Well, as you said, I did quite a lot of TV work, so so looking down the lens is quite normal for me. So I like the conference in the fact that, as you said, when I might have spoken down a TV camera for 15 minutes and they take the smallest sound bite that you possibly can. So really an opportunity to express myself and know I'm not going to be cut on the editing floor is great. I think doing it live versus it done on a camera, there's pros and cons. You know, you don't get the buzz of a live audience. You can't see if what you're saying is hitting the audience. So you've got to trust your own instincts more with things. Whereas when it's live, even though you can be looking out into the abyss sometimes, you still hear and feel the audience. You might get a laugh or something. And that's the thing I miss, that playing off that audience that you can't get from looking down the camera doing it virtually.
Scott, you're nodding at that point.
Yeah, almost the same experience for me. I mean, I obviously I'm a professional speaker, so I love the buzz of the crowd. But 9 months ago, you know, my business collapsed, like a lot of people's did, and I decided to have to get in front of the camera. And I've gone on a journey really through. I mean, the live work, I go live twice a week, but I am actually now, one of my sort of new axioms for me is the stories in the edit. So I'm working really hard on producing videos now myself, which I cannot believe I'm doing it. I just can't believe it. But it's just become a fascination for me. So I'm comfortable with it now, but I really wasn't. 9 months ago, guys, I was terrible. Just look at some of my old videos; they're terrible. So yeah, I think
remind us of your YouTube address, Scott.
It's just youtube.com/Scott McArthur.
Do you want to do that again? No, jolly good. So we're all geared up. Let's end with Hayley then. What's your thought about this change in delivery that we're all dealing with now?
I actually think it's great. I used to spend my life on trains and planes. Now I'm with my family a lot more. There's a silver lining. But actually what I would say is we've got a responsibility whenever we get the opportunity to present, to bring the energy. And I do think you have to be even bigger sometimes on the little screen than you have to be on the stage. But there's such an opportunity to use every trick in the book, to lean forward and to use your hands and to use your tone of voice. And I wish sometimes that presenters were brave enough to do that, but you do feel a bit of a wally because you're in your room doing these huge expressions which seem unnecessary, but actually I think they are helpful for the audience.
I think you've come up with another phrase there, useful for me. You feel a bit of a wally. When I first did that thing with the clapperboard, I thought, will I look a bit of a wally? You know, when at one point I kind of go in close on some of my stuff, you think, is this? But then you get feedback and you hear, no, actually, it brings fun to the party. So I think you just have to go for it and embrace it, don't you? In a moment, we're going to hear back from Jeff as we just wrap things up and do some final thanks. But the good news is we're all running nicely to time. I was asked at the end of this, I was given 5 minutes to sum up my thoughts. You don't want 5 more minutes of me, but it's been an absolute privilege once again to be listening to some great speakers, learning myself about the speaking industry and how these things can work and the challenges our businesses face. Angie, the power of the why, that really came across to me. And if I may say, a humbleness on my part of thinking about the job you have with so many people and so much responsibility. And as a journalist whose job it is always to challenge, I think we sometimes as journalists need to remind ourselves of the challenges you face and the extraordinary things that so many public figures are facing at this time. Pretty thankless task, I think. Scott, your stories have been great to hear as well. And the resilience piece, the changing, the trying new things, that has confirmed I feel I'm on the right path, but I've taken a lot from you on that one too. And Glen, the power of silence, the power of music, being a little bit out there, having Barry Gibb's crotch over your shoulder, that's a memory that's burnt into my mind for all time to come. But just the power of doing things a little bit differently and having a bit of fun with it. And Hayley, the bully, don't ask or you won't get. Just having the courage and also being truthful about yourself and your feelings. That's all been great for me. The radiator or the drain, that's a phrase I'm gonna hang on to. Let's all be radiators. I think we've had a lot of warmth, a lot of heat coming out of our 4 radiators. So let's give us all a virtual clap now. Let's give them a clap anyway, and a big thank you. It is frustrating, isn't it, that we can't do that big cheer in the room, but we hope you're cheering. And do in the chat box, that'll be up for the next few minutes. Just send any messages, any praise, any feedback. Sally has asked for feedback as well on what you've made of this. So that would be much appreciated. Let's just go to Jeff to hear a few words before we just very finally wrap things up. Over to you, Jeff.
Thank you, John. That's been quite amazing, I have to say. You know, one of the tricks with a conference like this is not the quality of the individual speakers. That's important, but it's the mix. It's how they're different from each other. And I think what's really struck me is they've been complementary, but they've also been very, very, very different. If everyone had sat there with the Bee Gees crotch behind them, I nearly said crutch for some reason, crotch behind them, I don't think it would have gone down quite so well. So a really strong thank you to the to the speakers. John, massive thank you to you for your professionalism and fun and everything else, and for holding it all together. I also want to thank again, as I did up front, but I don't apologize for doing it again, to our sponsors. So to Thacum, we heard from Brett, Angie in terms of Southern and Gatwick Express, and Reigate and Banstead Borough Council. And I also want to give a particular mention to Avensis, who have supported us through the sort of AV technical side of this. And just if I've got a minute, a little story from a GDB perspective. It was, I think, about 6 days away from the Gatwick Diamond Business Awards event 2020, 600 people at the Effington Park Hotel, Giles Brandreth booked, band booked, 600 people paying for their dinners, and we had to pull it. And getting through that was our challenge, and a huge amount was down to the team, obviously, and we pulled it off. And in December we had a very, very successful awards ceremony online. Avensis were a big part of that journey. And the point I want to make, though, is a slightly wider one, and it's the power of the C. So the message I'd want to emphasize is the power of community. That, in fact, is what's got us through this period and is getting us through it. And I think is what will continue to take us forward. So the power of C is very, very important for us. But C does not stand for crotch, I'm afraid, Glen, but power of community. A final thank you to the team at GDB, of course, for their imagination and innovation in taking this forward. And I have to, sometimes you're told you shouldn't single out individuals, but I'm going to. You know, Sally has put heart and soul into this, as she did into the awards. So a special thank you to Sally. And that's it for me. So thanks. I hope you've all enjoyed it, and see you at Re-Energise 2022.
Something very much to look forward to. Thank you, Jeff. Yes, and if I could just, won't repeat thanks to the sponsors, but I will do a shout out for Kevin and Sharma, who are from Avensis, who've been behind the scenes, making sure that when you need to hear from Glen, he's up. When you need to hear from Angie, she's up. Me, I'm up. The questions. There's a lot goes on behind the scenes, and we couldn't have done it without them. And of course, also Mandy and Gabrielle and Katie, they've been busy looking at the questions on Slido again behind the scenes, but so important. It's been a great fun. It's lovely to hear that community word. I have really felt that today, because I've seen names pop up here and I've thought, oh, I've met them, I've spoken with them, I've had fun with them, we had a laugh with them, and I've really just felt part of a big family here. So that's why it's been such a great experience for me too. Let's end not with a clapperboard. I think we're done with the clapperboard now, but let's end with a little bit more music as we all click leave. No rush to leave, but if you want to hear a bit more music, Glen is going to play us out, but with our warmest wishes, our good luck and our hopes for re-energizing through 2021. It's goodbye from me and all of the rest of the team here. Over to you, Glen. Take it away.